In this presentation today, we'll be looking at what's new in formZ 8 Junior, which is a major update to what was previously called Bonsai 3D. And if you go to our website at formZ.com, and if you click on the products link here up at the top here, you'll see that formZ basically comes in three flavors now: formZ Pro, formZ Junior, and formZ Free. formZ Free is a great way to get started exploring the power of 3D modeling using just a smaller subset of modeling tools. formZ Pro includes all the modeling tools and features available for modeling, rendering, and animation and layout. Now formZ Junior, that's right in the middle. It contains over 80 additional modeling tools that are not available in the free version, yet half the cost of the Pro version. So what can you do with formZ Junior? Well, if you click on the formZ Junior link, you can access some general quick feature highlights here in our new website. And for a full list of features, you can click here. And we have a very comprehensive feature comparison chart for Pro, Junior, and Free. At a quick glance, you can see that formZ Junior has more than double the features of the free version and over half the features of the Pro version, which positions formZ Junior as a very competitive solution for your 3D modeling needs. Now if we go back to the formZ Junior page, you can see that there's a second link for more details on just the new features that are in the formZ 8 Junior. And if I click on that, you can see this is all the new stuff. So if you're coming from the Bonsai 3D side, you can see all the new stuff that's coming up here. All right, and this is the focus of our presentation today, mostly all the new stuff that's in formZ Junior. Let's begin with the addition of the subdivision modeling as a new personality for formZ's already diverse modeling capabilities. And this allows you to create very unique organic forms by starting with just a simple cage. So let's launch formZ Junior and see how this new subdivision modeling works. Okay. All right, so let's go into formZ. There we go. All right, so we're beginning with the subdivision modeling. Well, here's the subdivision tools, new set of tools here in formZ Junior. Now, formZ Junior contains only 5 of the 13 subdivision tools that are found in the Pro version. However, you're going to be quite amazed at how much you can do with a smaller subset of tools. So we'll start with a quick general overview of the tools themselves, and then we'll do some actual projects to highlight how you can use these tools in the context of the workflow of an actual project. So here's the basics of how the tools work. You start off with a simple cage, and I'll keep it really simple here. Just make a simple box. It could be any type of complex faceted type of a object. When you click on the object with the subdivision tool, it smooths all the faces out. And there's a sharpness option that's over here, and this will allow you to increase or decrease the amount of smoothness applied to all those faces. So if you increase the sharpness, you pretty much basically get the original geometry back out of it. And if you decrease the sharpness, then you can see we're smoothing all the faces that are there. You can also apply the sharpness to a face by face or edge by edge level. So I can select one face right here and increase decrease the sharpness for just that one face. And I can apply this to just a single edge. So if I want to pull it more towards this edge over here, I can do that, or maybe more towards a single point. So there's a lot of flexibility with controlling how smooth the subdivision is going to smooth your cage. All right, now we can also move that original cage. So you can see here, these show controls actually shows the points and segments of the original cage that we had there. So we can move a face, we can move a segment, we can move a point and adjust that shape that way. Or you can just edit the subdivision object directly. So I can go in there and using the normal move tools, I can use move, rotate, scale, whatever I want. And since I'm on a Mac, I'm going to hold down the command key. If you're on Windows, you can hold down the control key. I can grab just a single face. I can grab a single edge and just pull that one edge up. I can grab a single point and drag that. And you can see how flexible that is with being able to just sort of move the different parts of that subdivision object at the point, segment, face levels. Okay. We can grow additional faces off of this. You can see there's a grow face tool, and what that does is I can select any face and it grows a brand new face from that. and you can see I can actually extend the actual distance of that. And then there's this yellow control handle, which is the angle. So I can actually take that new face that's attached to that, and I can change the distance and the angle simultaneously using this yellow control handle here. So if you're trying to build a more complex shape, you can start with something simple, and then just start tweaking and growing faces to be able to create a more complex shape. So you grow a face off of there, and I'm not sure what I'm ending up with here, but I think you get the idea of how that works. Okay, so we got some kind of shape like this. And we can see that, in a nice smooth organic shape, we can access the original cage information. So there's a swap tool, and if I were to click on my subdivision object, we can swap it out with the actual cage. And we can actually dynamically switch back and forth. So here I can actually go back here and maybe move a face, segment a point, maybe drag the segment and pull it out there, and we can actually edit that cage, or I can swap and go back to the subdivision object, and with all the smoothing applied to that. Okay. So that's basically how those tools work. Now, the thing about this personality is you can actually convert it to either a quad-based mesh or a NURBS object. Let's try the quad mesh. If I were to click on that object, you can see it makes a nice, wonderful quad mesh for that, which is great for 3D printing and also for gaming, or just nice, clean, aesthetic quad mesh that we have there. Okay, if we undo that, I just want to show that in the subdivision tool itself, if you click on that object, we do have control of the number of iterations. And as we increase or decrease that number, it's going to increase or decrease that quad mesh when we convert that over. Okay, so let's look at the other option. If we convert to a NURBS object, I click on my subdivision object, and now it's the same shape, it's the same form. However, it's now a network of NURBS surfaces, and so it's still a single object, it's still solid, but now all those smooth surfaces are now NURBS type surfaces. And if you want to access those, we can use the tools here to actually unstitch any of those surfaces. I'll unstitch that one, and you can see it'll actually separate it out from the rest of that object. And then we can use all of the NURBS modeling tools on that. We'll use the convert tool to be able to get access to the control parameters for that, and just show controls, and there we go. So I can start, use that just like any other NURBS inside of your project and move those controls around. Okay. If we want, we can actually stitch that surface back into the network of curves that we have there, and we're back to a single object, a single solid object, and you can do that for 3D printing or whatever we want. Okay. So that's a basic look at all these tools, except for the soft tool. We haven't looked at that yet. What does that do? Well, what that does is it's a subdivision tool, but it doesn't smooth the whole object. It actually smooths the edges of the object. Just to sort of show you how that works, do a real simple piece here, maybe a simple box. And if I use the soft tool, subdivision softening, I can click on any object, and it's actually just applying sort of a nice little smooth transition across all the edges of that object. And you have a dynamic arrow, you can move that around to sort of increase or decrease the distance. Think of it sort of like a rounding tool, except it's using the subdivision algorithm to round the edges of the object. Now, if we were to swap back into the cage, you can see that's exactly what's happening. It's actually beveling all of the edges, and then it's applying the smooth algorithm to that to be able to keep sort of the flat surfaces that are there and just apply the subdivision to the round edges only. So that's basically how these tools work on a technical level. So let's apply them to create a few objects to see how we can use them in the context of an actual workflow. Okay, so let's start with the softening tool. Well, how could we use that? Well, let's say we want to create some kind of a sofa. And you can see in just a couple minutes we could quickly box out this rough approximation of the shape of some kind of sofa, right? And what we're going to do is select all those objects, use the soften tool, and just give it maybe about an 1/8 inch distance there. And boom, I can click, and we now have softened all the hard edges that are there. And if I go into a shaded full mode, you can see now we have a nice, more realistic looking sofa there by just putting a slight curvature to all of the edges that are there. And that looks quite a bit different. If I just rounded all those edges, it would still look very clunky, because you still have these flat boxes that just have rounded edges, whereas now that larger curvature that we have in there is just making it look more of a realistic soft type object. Okay, so that's just one way to use the subdivision soft tool. All right, let's create, speaking of furniture, let's create another type of furniture, maybe some kind of office chair. So we can start off by actually modeling a very rough, boxy cage and let the subdivision tool do all the smoothing for us. Okay, we can probably model that in a couple minutes, right? So let's take a quick look at that. So what we'll do is start off with just a box, and we're going to use our reshaping tools. And the reshaping tools are nothing new in formZ Junior. Those were in Bonsai also. And I'm just going to use the offset segment to sort of offset an edge over here. Something like that. And then use the reshape tool to pull that up. Offset a couple more edges on the side for the arms of the chair. And I can reshape that down. And there we go. We have a rough shape of a chair. Use the subdivision tool, click on it, and there we go. Nice smooth organic shape. And of course, I still have access to all those controls to be able to further tweak that shape to sort of modify that. Okay, let's swap back to our cage, and you can see in just maybe about a minute or two we can maybe knock out the rest of the boxes here to create the legs, and then we use a subdivision tool on that, and we can see we get nice smooth transitions there between these different areas there. And there we go, nice little chair. Shouldn't take very long to create things like that. All right. Let's try something with a little more detail. What we'll do is we'll create a architectural column, and you can see this very smooth, soft, detailed type column or a pedestal based on the height and the radius of the column here. You can see that actually the cage is pretty simple, but I'm also going to show some other things you can do with the subdivision tools to help articulate some of the detail here, like we're going from a round into a square transition here, and there's a couple of neat things we can do with the subdivision to make that type of modeling really easy to do. So let's take a look at that. Let's start off with just a simple box. Use the offset outline, and I'm going to offset and outline the insert options on, so it's inserted in there, so I can reshape that up a little bit. I'm going to do another offset outline again on here, and then reshape that up in there. So now we have a single object which has a stepped effect on there. So we'll go to the subdivision tool, and I'll click on it, and there we go. So the subdivision's smoothing everything, every single face. And that looks nice, except the bottom is sort of rounded, and I want that to be flat. So what I can do is just select the bottom face of the cage here, so you can see the bottom face highlights red, and then if I take the sharpness for that and increase it up to the maximum of 100%, it makes it perfectly flat. So now the base of the column is now flat. All right, now the top here, we want to sort of flatten that off too, so I'll simply select the top face and zoom in a little bit here, moving around until it highlights just that top face, and I click there. Now I've highlighted that top face. Now if I increase the sharpness to 100%, we get a very sharp edge there. It's perfectly flat. However, we might want to back that sharpness down a little bit, and we can still add some rounding. It's not really rounding, but it's sort of smoothing across that edge there. So I bring that down maybe about 50%, and you can see here I can still have a little bit of smoothness across the face, but then it's perfectly flat in the center here. And that's how we can create the base for the column, just like that. All right, that looks pretty easy, right? Let's create the column itself. So instead of putting a bunch of details in there for the flutes, we're going to do a very rough cage, do it really fast to be able to quickly model these types of forms. And we're going to do that by creating a 24-sided polygon. So using the polygon tool, and give it the radius that we want, and pull it up a little bit. Now, so there's one section of the column. Then using the reshape tool, I'm going to use the keep edges. This is nothing new. This is in the previous version too. And the reason I'm doing that is that now I can reshape another section on that same solid object, but it creates an actual edge loop around that and keeps it there. And that'll influence the subdivision smoothing, because remember, each face is going to be an individual surface that gets smoothed by the subdivision tool. So now we'll pull this up for the center part of the column. All right, and then do a couple more sections up on top. And there we go. So just by using the reshape tool, keep edges, we can actually add additional edge loops within our shape as we're creating it. Now, what I'm going to do to create the fluted sections, I'm just going to use the reshape tool and start pushing every other face in. Now, I'm also going to push this one in. And with the reshape keep edges, you can see as I push those in, we're actually maintaining that edge that is there. Let's push that in a little bit. There we go. So you can see as it smooths all this out, we're going to create more of a sharper radius of curvature inside that flute there, instead of having the smoothness go all the way from one end to the other. Now you can also reshape multiple faces, so I can actually hold the shift key down and just grab a whole bunch of these all in one shot here. Grab as many as I want, let go of the shift key, and I can push them all in simultaneously. Alright, so anyways, if you were to take another minute or so, you'd probably end up with a shape that looks something like this. Okay? And with that, we'll go to our subdivision tool, click on that object, and it smooths everything. And so we get a nice little fluted transition here, except the top and the bottom are rounded also, and we don't want that, so we know how to fix that now, right? I'll select the bottom face and crank the sharpness up to a maximum 100%. So it creates a very sharp edge up in the top there. Let's do the same thing over here. Click on that, crank that sharpness up, and there we go. So now we have a nice little center fluted column section that's flat on the top and bottom from just a very rough cage. Let's put that in the shaded full mode to take a look at that from different angles to see the result of what we got there. Okay. All right, let's move on to the top capital of the column. So we'll sort of start off similar to what we did with the base, except I'm going to show you a couple of neat little tricks we can do here with the subdivision modeling. We want it round down here, but we want to keep it square up on the top. So how can we use the subdivision tool to be able to accomplish that type of form? Well, let's try it. Let's do subdivision, click on our cage, and the bottom, we're going to select that bottom face just like we did with the base and sharpen that probably around 50%, so we can still get flat in the middle but still a little bit of curvature there. Now the top, when I select that face, notice that if we put that sharpness up to 100%, it makes it perfectly flat on the face, but yet it doesn't square it off to the actual corners because we're applying the sharpness only to the top face only. So what we can do is apply sharpness to these vertical edges also. So I can increase the sharpness there and see how it actually extends that subdivision to the original boundary of the original cage. Do the same thing over here, click that vertical edge, crank up the sharpness so it conforms back to the original cage itself. Okay, we just do that with all four of those vertical corners that are there. And there we go. So now we have a square top, and then we have a rounded section down here. And we can just keep editing this as much as we want. For example, I can move maybe these vertical segments up a little higher. So let's crank that up a little bit. Put that up a little higher so we get a little more of a transition from the round to the square area that's up on top. So I'm making some slight adjustments there. Okay, so grab that, pull that up, and I'll just have to make sure I grab all four and move those to the same distance going up. So that's how we create that smooth transition for the top capital of that column. All right, there we go. We can put a nice little texture on there, and we can also 3D print this thing. It's a solid. We can convert this to a quad mesh and send it to any type of 3D printer. Actually, I do have a 3D print of that. I just printed it yesterday. I don't have a photo to show you at this time, but that came out pretty cool. But anyways, you can see how just a simple cage like we have back here can easily be created and converted into a nice smooth object that looks like that. All right. Tell you what, let's do another example. What we're going to do is create something such as this coffee mug, and once again, by using subdivision model, we can start off with something simple as just very rough cage here, and it smooths everything out. But I also want to show that you can put a lot of detail into the subdivision modeling. When you think of subdivision modeling, you think of organic character type modeling, and it's very loose and fluid. And how can you do exact modeling with that? Well, you actually can. formZ gives you the tools to be able to put as much precision into that subdivision modeling as you need, whether it's more into the product design or architecture design or whatever your field is. Okay, so let's do a quick fast forward through this project, and what we'll do, go into formZ here. All right, and we're going to start off, and we're going to create this to the true scale. So if I go in here, you can see in the project settings, I can set this to be a small scale, and so it'll automatically set all of my parameters for me. So let's go in and start with the polygon tool. Let's make it a 7-sided polygon, and I'm going to make it a 1.5 inch radius and go about 1/2 inch up. Okay, now from there I'm going to use the reshape tool with the keep edges to grow another section off of that, maybe 2.5 inches, and I want to taper this in. So what I'll do is just use the scale tool, and I don't want to scale the whole object. I'm going to scale just the face. I'm going to hold down the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows. All right, and I can snap to the center point there and drag it in and out to sort of scale that face. So I'm going to go in a little bit and reshape that again, maybe 3 inches. All right, and then I'll scale this top face outward the same distance I did the bottom one. Or it doesn't have to be the same. It can flare out more on the top if I want, whatever you want your design to be. And let's reshape a couple more sections here. And you can see by reshaping, we're getting those extra edge loops in there, which will help to maybe build a handle off of this section over here. And also, it also caused the subdivision smoothing. It'll be tapered in here, but if we have a couple sections there that are vertical and straight, it'll keep that part of the mug straight up at the top part there. So you can actually incorporate a lot of that type of information and detail when you're originally creating that cage. Now at this point, this is a solid object. So if I take the delete tool and hold down the Command key and delete, select just the top face, hold down the Control key in Windows, it's now a surface object. Now to create the thickness for that mug, what I'm going to do is go to the thicken tool, which is located right here. And let's give it a thickness of 1/4 inch. And we'll go in. Click on my object and there. So now our cage has the thickness already built into that. Now there's a lip up at the top, sort of recessed area. So if I go to the offset segment tool, once again, I'm going to change my grid snap to maybe about 1/8 of an inch, so I can just quickly grab an edge and just move it one grid snap across. I know that's exactly 1/8 of an inch without even typing in a single value. Now the other thing I could do is I could probably snap to the actual midpoint of the segment there, because I know that's 1/4 inch thick. So so I'm putting accurate detail into this cage that I'm creating. And then if I want, I can reshape by holding the Shift key down and selecting all of these faces at the same time. Instead of doing them one by one, I'm going to select them all and then let go of the Shift key and click and drag to reshape those up. Maybe let's make that 1/4 inch. There we go. And there's the shape of our mug. And if we go to a Subdivision tool, we click on it, we get this nice smooth looking shape that looks like that, which has a uniform thickness because it's already incorporated into that cage. Well, the next thing we need to do is build a handle on there. If we look at that handle, let's take a look at that. Do I still have it up there? Yep. There it is. The handle comes out the side, and we got these grooves that are in there. So let's see how we can build a cage that's going to sort of incorporate that type of detail. Well, let's use the swap tool, go back to our cage, and I'll take this face right here, and using the reshape tool, pull it out. Now I could scale that face to sort of taper that in, or sometimes I just use the move tool, and holding down that key, I can just grab hold of one edge, pull that in a certain distance. I'll do the same thing over here, grab that edge, and pull that in, and there we go. So now we have a customized taper for that handle. Let's reshape again and move a segment, and I think you get the idea of how that works. All right, now to create that actual groove that's in there, we need to recess some areas inside of there. So I'm just going to use the offset segment tool a few times across there, and then just reshape a couple sections down. And there we have some recessed areas, and then you can see if we go back to our subdivision object, we get this nice smooth groove in there. Now it drops down rather sharp, so I want to sort of taper that out a little bit. Let's go back to our cage. I'll just use the move tool, grab hold of that edge, and drag that out a little further. There we go. Let's take this one, move it that same distance, and now you can see when I swap it back into the sub-D object, we get more of a gradual transition into those grooves. So there's a lot of control here with getting that shape exactly the way you want it. All right, let's go back to the cage here and finish off the handle. We need to extend that a little further, so I grab hold of the face, reshape that out, and it's going in the wrong direction because we're going perpendicular to the surface. So I'll switch to the perpendicular to reference plane option, drop that down a couple inches, and I'm going to do this twice. I'm going to drop it down a second time, 2 inches, and the reason for that is because by doing that twice with that keep edge option, it's going to actually give me once again, a nice little edge loop inside of there. So now I can just grab this edge, drag that out a little bit so we can bulge the handle a little more towards the bottom here. Now all the stuff I'm doing with the cage, of course, once I'm in the sub-D mode, I can change it there too. So if I swap it back into the subdivision object, you can see it's very easy to just grab hold of this edge and just sort of drag it and pull it. So you can either do it in the cage or in the subdivision level when you're making adjustments to that. And there we go. So I think the mug is pretty much done itself. We'll have to create a lid for this thing. So let's see how that works. We'll go back to our cage object, and we want to create the lid to match precisely with this top part there. And so what we can do is use this little feature that's inside of the pick tool, which allows us to select a sequence of edges. So if I just hold the cursor there for just a second, you see it's a segment sequence option. And so as I move that across my object, you can see I can actually get loops here. So I can get all of the segments around that loop, or any vertical loop, or anywhere. And you can see I can easily click, and it gives me that entire outside boundary. Even though there's other edges in there, it'll find those loops for me. All right, so from there, we'll derive a new object from that. Use the derivative extrusion tool. And I'll go ahead and extrude that up certain heights, maybe about 1/4 inch. Give it a different color. And then if I were to select that, I'm going to use the isolate option. That's something that's been in formZ, isolate. So we can actually work on just that by temporarily isolating all the rest of the scene. So there's our lid. We use the reshape tool to add a little more thickness to that. And the offset outline, we have a new feature which you can actually give it an actual distance, whereas before you had to type in the distance every time. Now we have a new option here in the junior version which allows us to give us one single distance and just keep clicking on faces, and the offset outline will always be set to whatever distance you have set inside of there, if that's the option that you want. All right, so we can recess this a little bit, recess that, and there we go. There's our lid. Sub-D it, now a nice smooth shape that looks like that. Now, of course, we need some kind of opening here so we can drink the coffee out of there, and we need to pop the lid off, so we need a little pull handle over here, so we can quickly add those features. Let's swap back to our cage. For the hole itself, we can just use the 3-point rectangle with the hole option, and I can pretty much draw anywhere I want on this object. So let's draw a shape right about there. There we go. Now we have a nice hole in there. For the tab in the back, I'll use the reshape tool again, pull a section out, and now when I use subdivision on that, or actually go back, swap, either way, we have all that additional detail already put into that lid there for us. There we go. All right, so let's reveal the rest of our geometry. Swap that back up in the sub-D mode, and there we go. So nice organic shape created to a specific thickness with pretty accurate information here for the radiuses and things like that. So that's how we create something that looks like that. There we go. All right, let's do one last example and we'll move on to some of the other stuff. What we're going to do is create these nice beams. This is a recreation of an interior scene inside the new One World Trade Center. And these nice organic beams look like a perfect candidate for subdivision modeling. So we'll spend about a minute or two just sort of showing this. Because the one thing I want to show with this is not only the capability of being able to create organic forms like this, but the flexibility you have with being able to modify it. So as your design changes, there's a lot of control there to be able to adjust these and have it as an integral part of your design process. You don't want to just create something. You're saying, well, yeah, I can create that, but if you're not sure what you want, you can adjust it. It's very flexible. And so let's see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the model that was done in formZ Junior. There it is right there. All right, and here's the actual beams themselves. So I'm going to select one of those, and I'm going to isolate it so we can focus just on that beam itself. And of course, we can see, it's a very organic shape derived through the subdivision modeling. So if we swap back to the original cage, I think up to this point, watching all that reshaping business going on, you know how this was created. Now, what I want to show is this bridging system that goes into here. Here's one thing that you can do. The Pro version actually has a subdivision bridging tool. You can click two faces and it automatically creates a transition between those two. Junior doesn't have that subdivision bridge tool, but you can still create that type of bridging in a little more of a manual process. It takes a couple extra clicks to actually do that, but I'll just sort of show you. If I were to get rid of that, I'm going to reshape this section back a little bit. There was a stage when I was creating these that I had the two columns coming out here, and I wanted to sort of create the transition. Now this is one single solid object, because when I'm reshaping and off the existing faces, I'm actually sculpting one single solid object. But I need to get this to sort of fuse back into itself, so it sort of loops back on itself. And like I said, Pro has a bridging tool. We don't have that in Junior, but what you can do is in the cage itself, you can use the reshaping tool, and I can actually take this and reshape it. And as I pull this down, I can actually snap it to this existing object. And the reshape tool is a Boolean operation, so it does fuse all that together as one single object. So if I were to go back and to the subdivision tool, you can see that it does create that transition for me. So now at this point, if I want to take these ends here, of course it's smoothing these end faces, so to make those flat, I can just select the face and increase sharpness. That's pretty much the same thing we did with that column. So let's go ahead and do that with these ends here. And let's, you can actually apply this to multiple faces at the same time. So if I went in here, I can shift pick multiple faces on that cage and sharpen them all simultaneously. There we go. And now let's talk a little bit more about the flexibility now. We've sort of seen that a little bit here throughout the presentation, that we have these controls that we can use to further change that. So I can grab these controls, and as I stretch and pull that, I can take that bridge type transition there, pretty much move it anywhere that I want and make it thicker. If I move just these controls, and I think you see, how as you're designing these, you have a lot of control of being able to adjust the shape and size of that. Now, we can take this one step further. We can create a component out of that. So if we have multiple repetitive objects, we can edit one, and all of them will then update in the scene. So let's take a quick look at that. Let's use the create component tool. Create component, and I'll click on that object, and I can name it anything I want. Let's call this beam 01 or whatever. Click OK, and now it's saved as a component in that file. You can even export that out into a component library that can be used with other projects. So let's make a few copies of this thing, or we can actually place them around the scene as a component, or just multiple copy the one that we already have here. And take this thing here, let's rotate it, I don't know, a certain number of times. And let's see, as our design progresses, we say, you know what, I want to change the shape of this. I want this to be a little further down the top of that top section of the beam there. Well, all you have to do is edit that component. And so here, we can use all of the subdivision tools on this. And I can perhaps take these controls, move those down a little bit. Let's switch that down over here. There we go. And then when we're all done, we right click and say component complete. We're done. And off it goes. It automatically updates all of the other columns that are inside of that scene. So you see they all take on that same change. There we go. So you can see that the subdivision can be an integral part of that design process. All right. Well, let's wrap it up by just showing a couple more things that are new in the formZ 8 Junior. And another thing that I'm excited to show is the new interactive shaded modes. And so you can see here we have a project. This was actually modeled in a formZ Pro version. However, all the tools that were used to model this are actually available in formZ Junior. So if you watch the actual webinar when we build this thing, you can do this in Junior also, because there's no tools that were used in this that are not available inside of Junior. But anyways, what I am trying to show here, though, is that if I were to spin this around, you can see that this is the shaded full mode, and this is a working mode. So you can see if I were to take and use all the modeling tools, I can actually create geometry, so on and so forth. And if you look at the display options here, you can see some new features that are here. One of them is the bump mapping. So now the live interactive mode does support bump mapping. So if we spin around down here, you can see that we have a rough texture that's on the water. So we're getting the specular highlighting of the water as we go across there, and the 3D effect of the tiles and things like that. So it's just really enhances the visualization, both as a designer to see a more realistic visualization of your design, plus to be able to present it to others, and you don't have to create an actual movie file or anything. You can sort of spin this around in real time. Some of the The other things are the new shadows. You can increase or decrease the actual darkness of those shadows, and we also have a soft shadow option, so you can make them more fuzzy. We also have live interactive ambient occlusion. So if I turn that off, you can see that that is without, and that's with it turned on. So it's just darkening the corners to sort of emulate sort of how light reacts within the real world. Okay, and this is really neat because now if you go into like the sun position palette, you can use real-time sun type studies in a more realistic visualization mode. And if you were to export this out, the movie video that would be created really fast because you can actually render it out in shaded full mode, and it would be almost like a real-time exporting of that movie file to show it to someone else. All right. Some other things, material groups. There's a lot of little things in there too, just to help make your workflow more efficient. For example, you can see this project here. I have my materials organized in groups. So I can click on this group to get all the materials inside of there. Let's give it a larger icon here. So here's all the materials used for the actual windows. Here's all materials used in the landscaping. So instead of having one materials palette with 100 materials there, now I can organize this into groups, and you can have nested groups and so on and so forth. Let's see what else. How about the new version is also 64-bit. So if I were to do about formZ, you can see it's 64-bit to take advantage of all the RAM you have for RenderZone renderings and things like that. All right. Let's see. We also have added the Sketchfab exporter. So here's another model, and this is in real-time shaded mode. And if we want to share this with someone else, we can actually export that out to the Sketchfab site. And it's actually built into formZ. All you have to do is choose the option, and when you have an account there, the accounts are free. You have this API token that is your personal token, and that's the code that lets it know that when you upload the model, it knows where to go. It knows to go to your account. All right, and once it's up there, it'll look something like this. If I go up there and go to the Sketchfab site, log into my account, it lists all of your models, and now there's all sorts of features that you can control for the settings, the background and lighting and textures, and all sorts of effects that you can put hotspots on there for like annotation. So when the person clicks on it, it jumps to a view and gives you some information about that. And it's a great way to share it with others. And you can actually embed the code into your own website, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of flexibility up there with being able to take your models and share them on sort of a neutral site there. Okay. The file sizes are a lot smaller now. The list goes on and on. I could spend a lot more time on that, but I think that's enough for now to cover the basics. Let's go back to the formZ website here, and you can see we covered a lot of the new stuff here. The big thing was the subdivision modeling, so we spent most time on that. The interactive rendering modes and the Sketchfab is new also, and I peppered in a few of these new things, but you can see the list goes on way beyond what I have time to show here. A lot of things are little, but you know, all sorts of other little enhancements and additions to the existing tools, allowing you to be more productive than ever with formZ Junior. All right, and this concludes the What's New in formZ 8 presentation.